Steve Negron. He's running for Congress in New Hampshire's 2nd Congressional District. He first has to win the primary. That's September 11th. Steve, welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show.
So, Steve, tell us about why you're running for Congress, what your involvement with Corey Lewandowski is, and why you're here.
Sure. Well, I'm a current state representative. I'm in New Hampshire, and I sat on the election law committee over the last session. And in New Hampshire, that brings a lot of interest to people because we were able to let people do same-day registration, which created an issue for us in the state. And one of the things that I found is that people will travel 2.5 hours to have 5 minutes of the time of the committee because they fundamentally believe that they can affect change, that they fundamentally believe that they have a voice. And that resonated with me because our current Representative Ann Custer isn't our voice in the 2nd Congressional District, and we couldn't let it continue. So I went ahead and said, you know what, let's go ahead and throw our name in the hat. And we've been doing this since October, and things are going very, very well.
So let's start with your primary on September 11th. Just tell me a little about that. How many people are in it? And
Sure.
do you expect to win?
Sure. So there's 6 others that are up there. I potentially think there's like 3 that are leading the race along with myself. We've done the things that we're supposed to do. You know, we're taking this, and it's an old-time New Hampshire campaign. We're door knocking. I got the best field staff in the state. I got 5 college kids that are just unbelievable. We've knocked over 20,000 doors. You know, that's what they do every day. They're out there pounding the pavement. And we're reaching out to the voters, and we're hearing when we talk to the voters about this, we've coined the great national insecurity. And it's all the same, whether it's in the North Country of New Hampshire or it's out in the West Coast near Vermont. It's all about, you know, things, for example, the debt. Everybody's concerned about that. Immigration, national security, veterans care. So we see that there's a common thread that's out there, and we've galvanized, I believe, this grassroots effort that's out there that nobody else in the race has been able to do. And I think that we have the right objective going forward. And I also say on the stump speech is that there's that little saying in the rearview, on the side of your mirror, that things in the mirror are closer than they appear. That's us coming up on Custer. You know, she's not taking this race seriously. You know, she's a 3-term incumbent, $3 million cash on hand. She's got significant pockets, a tremendous fundraiser. So I think she thinks that she's just going to waltz in and win this election. That's not going to happen with us.
So do you expect an endorsement from the president?
I would love an endorsement from the president.
Do you expect one?
I don't know. I don't ever expect anything. You know, I'm a kind of guy that I work for everything. That's the way I was raised by my father. You know, when you start expecting something, you can get disappointed a lot. So we've got our head down. You know, we're pursuing this campaign the way we're supposed to go. And I think we've got the right team. We've got some great endorsements. Just last week, we picked up Bruce Breton and Fred Doucette from the Salem in that area down there. And I think that was huge for us. You know, Fred Doucette was a state co-chair for President Trump. You know, we've been with the Trump. I'm just tickled to death about his policies, you know, and as a military guy, you know, what he's doing right now is just nothing short of phenomenal. So I think that we have the right thing, and the president needs help. You know, the president needs help for people in Congress to move the agenda forward. And talking to our governor, Chris Sununu, you know, he can't pick up the phone and call any of his congressional delegation because he can't get any help. So we have 4 certainly delegates, 2 senators, 2 representatives. They're all Democrat. They don't help them. And so, you know, part of my role going down there is to push and help for Governor Sununu, and to help the president move his agenda.
Why are all 4 of your congresspeople Democrats when the state is basically split in half?
It's funny. I mean, people ask that question. You know, last election in 2016, we won the corner office with the governor. We have this unique executive council in New Hampshire, so it's a 5-person entity. We won that as Republicans. We won the House and we won the Senate. But the entire federal delegation is Democrat, and you got to shrug your shoulders. You know, it's kind of funny. How did that happen? And there really is no good answer. But I believe that now that, you know, everybody's talking about this blue wave, we don't believe that. We certainly don't believe it in our campaign. We understand that we have an opportunity to rally around what the president has done. You know, look at the empirical data of where we're at, whether it's with the tax cuts, whether it's with bringing North Korea to the table or Iran deal, all those things. And we see and hear on the campaign trail that people resonate with that. You know, there's a lot of people at the 30,000-foot level that are saying, oh, it's not going to happen, you know, whatever. What we're seeing on the ground is that people are really, really receiving what the president's done with his policies very well in the state of New Hampshire.
Curtis Ellis, looking at this campaign and looking at some of the trade policies that are going to affect New Hampshire, what would be your major concern here, and what would you like to see Steve do if he does get to Congress?
Well, I would love to see Steve support President Trump when
Absolutely.
he gets to Congress, and I think it's great to hear you, and it's great to see you here, and great to hear what you're saying, because we should have, and New Hampshire should have, a Republican senator. Unfortunately, in the last election, we had the then incumbent
Yes,
senator was uncertain in her support for President Trump, and I believe that cost her her seat. She lost very narrowly.
Kelly,
yes, sir.
Yeah, and so it's great to hear you be full-throated in your
Absolutely.
endorsement of this president.
Absolutely, because he's doing what he said he was going to do, and that's refreshing. You know, a lot of times people, prior to President Trump, they say some stuff, to get elected. And all of a sudden then, they waffle in the wind and they change direction. He has been steadfast in what he said, which is really a refreshing perspective for me, not only as somebody running for Congress, but as a citizen, to see that, the president is going to put this country first. I'm an old Reagan guy. I grew up in the 80s, and I knew that when my president took the podium, that he had the best interest of the country, and that's what President Trump is doing for us right now.
Yeah. I was in New Hampshire with John during the primary, and I was having breakfast at some diner, and right before the primary, and there was this old guy sitting next to me, and he wasn't sure who he was going to vote for.
Right.
Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders.
That's right.
What?
Okay.
And I hear you have two candidates who were both different in many ways, but they were united on one thing, that the free trade policies of the last several administrations have just been devastating to our country and to New Hampshire, because that was a blue collar mill driven economy up there.
Absolutely. In the North Country, which is where a lot of those paper mills and stuff, has been decimated, and so when we go up there, anything, their battle cry to me is anything you can do to bring jobs back. And it's not just jobs, it's just, they have to do some things up there from the state has to, like in an infrastructure perspective, just get like high-speed internet, simple things that we take for granted in a more developed area. We have to look at things that'll help the northern part of the country or the state bring those jobs back. Absolutely.
Yeah. What are the other issues that
national debt is one of the ones that that is always in my forefront. We had a great tax package in December. It was a great start. We need to make those permanent and continue to do that. But we have to be accountable in the government. We have to be able to start looking at people and looking at entities and say, you cannot keep on spending this way. As a small business owner and as a guy that was in the Air Force that was responsible for putting together budgets, partially for the Air Force, is like you have to hold people accountable. And the way we keep on doing these things, we keep on giving them money year after year, and money on top of it is just a worse budget. So I believe in what's called zero-based budgeting. I believe that you have to make people justify from the bottom up.
Start from zero every year.
Right? Because nobody knows. And I tell you, they'll do it. We see stuff when I was a program manager in the Air Force. The air staff would come down and say, okay, you had $100 million, now you only have 85. And we make it work. We'll grouse and we'll yell and we'll cry and we'll stomp our feet. But at the end of the day, we know that that's all that we have and we make it work. That's what has to happen. We have to look at people and say, and if you can't do it, whoever is in charge, then we'll find somebody who can. And it's about being responsible. It's about being accountable. And you know what? Everybody, you can't hug everybody. My father certainly didn't. Sometimes, you have to take a hard stand and have some tough love and just tell people, you know what? I appreciate your interest. You couldn't get it done. Let's get somebody in here who can.
We're with Steve Negron. He is a Republican candidate for Congress, New Hampshire Congressional District number 2. Where is that, Steve, just geographically?
Sure. So if you look at the state, it would be nice to just split the state up the middle.
Right.
But what we do is it starts in the south. We don't have these two large cities, which is Merrimack and Manchester, which is north. We go to Concord, the state capital, and then we go west all the way to Vermont, and then we go north all the way up to Canada. So land-wise, it's the largest district. Population-wise, it's not. The seacoast is the sexy one. It's Portsmouth. It's nice ships and everything. We have people that are farmers. We have people that are out there that are just salt of the earth folks, and those are the folks that we're out there that we're trying to reach out to. And I think we're being very successful at it.
All right, New Hampshire CD 2. You're in a contested 6-person Republican primary that'll be decided September 11th.
Yes, sir.
And is that a plurality, or do you have to get 50% plus one and go to a
50% plus one, and so you get the
get
most
runoff.
right.
And that'll be when?
Well, so no, whoever comes out with the most votes on September 11th will then meet Ann Custer November 6th in the general.
So you could get 31%, but if you have a
the most,
plurality,
yes, sir. Right,
then
correct.
You're going to be the nominee and
right.
go against.
That's right, and she's running uncontested again.
She's running uncontested.
Yeah.
And what did she win that district by in 2016 off the top?
Less than 5%.
Less than 5%.
Right. So the issue was certainly there was a huge bump from President Trump that was out there. The guy who ran against Ann Custer, I believe, should have done more campaigning. Right. I mean, she's vulnerable. She doesn't think so, but even her party, there's a paper in New Hampshire called the Concord Monitor, which is in her backyard, wrote a nice piece that said, let somebody else have a chance. Mm-hmm. And it is about representation. It is about making sure that you come back and listen to your constituents. And she doesn't do that. And I think that's resonating right now with the undecideds that are out there, which is a big voting block in the middle. And there's some people, when we knock on doors, that says, she doesn't come. I've called her. I've written her. She doesn't come back. And when she does come back, it's very opportunistic. It's very targeted. It isn't about, going to another town hall and actually driving there and talking to people in metal folding chairs. Yeah. That's not what happens. She does these voice or phone town halls kind of. Mm-hmm. I mean, she may check the box as saying it's a town hall, but that's not a town hall.
Right. We say the same thing to Republicans that have that. I mean, if you have that and the others, it's okay. But if that's all you have, it's not really a substitute for that. Steve, let me just ask you this. When you're knocking on doors, tell this to Curtis and I, and you're talking to voters in their kitchen or their living room, what are the number one thing that is on their mind right now?
The debt.
No kidding.
No kidding.
The debt.
The debt. They sit there and they say,
Voters that you talk to in rural New Hampshire are concerned about the federal debt.
Right. Because they see it looming on the horizon. We hear about it all the time. It's about that. This, to me, it's one of, if not the largest national security issue that we could just get buried underneath this debt. And they're trying to say, how do we hold Washington accountable in its totality? Because they don't look at it in a partisan way. They just hear and read and say it's Washington.
$21 trillion.
That's right.
Well, Curtis, let me ask you this: do you think that's unique to maybe New England, New Hampshire? Because we don't get that from anywhere. I mean, a couple, like there'll be a Walter Jones. It's not first or second. But I talk to people all day long, and the debt never comes up.
Right.
So is this unique, you think, to New England or New Hampshire?
I think this is Debt Day on the John Frederick Show. We've had two people in 1 hour talk about debt, and I've never heard about it before.
I mean, it's there, but it's looming.
Right.
But it's not like I never get anybody calls into the show or text us and say, I didn't get to sleep last night thinking about the $21 trillion debt.
Right. I think it might be a New England thing. The Yankees
very frugal.
The Yankees very frugal, have a reputation for being very tight.
Absolutely. And we talk about Sundays when they're balancing their checkbooks just like everybody else does. My grandmother used to say, you have so many gazintas and so many gazadas. That's it. It's very simple. If you don't have...
Wasn't he a representative of Carroll Shea Porter's district, Gazinta, Frank Gazinta?
That was Frank.
That's right, Gazinta. He was a congressman.
That was Frank Ginta.
Oh, Ginta.
He used
sorry.
to come on
the
show.
First CD. Yeah, absolutely.
Ginta.
Frank Ginta.
He drove Lewandowski bananas. Is that the guy?
He may have. I don't know. He was
nuts.
Yeah, he was from the First CD. Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and they look about
Is he still there? He got beat, didn't he?
He did get beat with Carroll Shea Porter.
They go in
16.
back and forth. He was in. He was
out.
Back
right. They were
in, then he was
flip-flopping.
out again.
Right. And now he's now he just got hired by a firm here in D.C. So he's now doing some work. Right.
He's in the swamp.
Right. Yeah. And, not only the debt, that's the big one, because they talk about, what do we do to make our ends meet? And certainly New Hampshire and New England, not just our state.
You can't have more
you can't spend what you don't have.
You can't have more gazintas than you have.
You have gazintas. I mean, and I know people are like, well, what does that mean? It says, you just have to live within your means. And I know that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but it's that simple, and at the federal level or at the House level. The House meaning a home in New Hampshire. You can't just keep on spending like that. You cannot pass that debt on to your children or your children's children. It's just, you have to pull the Band-Aid off, and everything has to be on the table. Everything. You cannot be, there's no sacred cows out there, and everybody has to share in the pain. And when you look at people in the eye and say, if I go to Congress, I'm a DOD guy. My small business does, defense work. And even within the Department of Defense, I believe that there's wasteful spending, and we need to look at that and say, how do we use our money that we have judiciously, still maintaining the force that we need? But I know firsthand, I was a program manager in the Air Force. I get it. And I was also in industry. I work for large defense corporations, and I see both sides of the fence, and I know the dark little secrets on both sides, and we could be more efficient, and that's just one agency. I think it'd be the same across all the other agencies in the government.
And opioids.
Yes.
Big problem in
Huge.
New Hampshire.
Yes. People in our state, it has affected. Everybody thinks that these drug issues are, kind of city related, but
Right.
in our rural areas, it's not. It's all the way up there. And I think what happens is that it's an issue where, I don't have a good job force that's up there to keep these people occupied,
Right.
to make a living for themselves. So that I think that's a contributor. Certainly the influx of drugs into this country. So I'm with the president about a wall. And people want to talk about immigration on the wall, but the wall to me is almost a trifecta. It certainly is about immigration, but it's about stopping the flow of drugs into this country, and it's about stopping the flow of terrorism into this country. Central and South America have favored nation status with some of the terrorist activities in the Middle East, and so they know that they can come through a porous border, and we need to lock that down. And the president said, there may be a time here in the near future that we have to stop it until we fundamentally find out who's in our country. There's 180 some odd ways, 185 ways to come into this country through visas. And for me, I need to know who's within our borders. That's the issue for me.
And who's driving our senators.
That's right. Absolutely.
All right. I tell you what, let me just read one text from one of our listeners. Eric in Richmond says, it's deeply concerning, the debt, but what is the average person supposed to do? We're all but powerless to stop the spending. I'm sick of the children argument. It just doesn't resonate. What are we supposed to do? Eric in Richmond.
Eric? Well, Eric, you need to send the right people to Congress. That's what you need to do. You need to know that there are fiscal conservatives out there that are not willing to back down from a fight. They're not willing to take a backseat. That's what the everyday person can do, is get involved, get out to the vote, put your vote out there, and put somebody in Congress to help this president move his agenda along and get those people out there that are reduced their debt. That's what they need to be doing.
So, Steve, if you get to Congress, you're going to fight for President Trump's America First agenda, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because that's the America I remember.
All right, Steve Negron. What's your
So the website is www.negron4congress.com. Go up there. You'll see the platform. We have a bunch of little video clips about things that are important to us in the campaign. And I appreciate you looking out. Drop us a note, and we'll see you in November.
All right, we'll see you in New Hampshire. I really appreciate your coming by.
Thank you very much for having me, sir.
Thank you very much. I want to thank our listeners for today. I want to thank my good friend, Curtis Ellis, Senior Advisor for America First Policies, for spending the day here with me. Curtis, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Keeping me company. And, I'm really appreciative that you mentioned on air the great breakfast buffet that I was put out here. I really appreciate that.
The tuxedo-clad waiters.
I know, a lot of people talk about this. And what I always tell my friends, my teenagers' friends, is, when you hang around the big guy, there's always plenty of food around. That's the main thing.